Hello. In this video, we're going to be introducing GitHub Actions Importer and how you can use the product to migrate your workflows to GitHub Actions. Before we talk about what GitHub Actions Importer is as a product, it's helpful to outline the various phases that come with a migration to GitHub Actions. The first phase of any migration is planning. Some activities in this phase involve looking at your current CI/CD footprint to understand how many pipelines you have defined, any complexities that you should be aware of upfront, for example, if you have customizations built on top of a CI/CD provider, and trying to build a timeline of what pipelines are ready to migrate immediately, what pipelines need a little bit of work prior to being migrated, or what pipelines should not be migrated at all. For example, if you have a legacy or a defunct pipeline. The next phase of a migration is forecasting. This activity involves looking at your previous usage of your CI/CD systems and forecasting the amount of usage you'd have in GitHub Actions. This is incredibly helpful to understand the number of runners that you're consuming and the types of runners you're consuming in your CI/CD system, so that when you migrate to GitHub Actions, you have the number and type of runners available in order to meet your demands. And the final phase here of automation is more traditionally what you'd think of when you migrate to GitHub Actions, where you are converting a single pipeline to its equivalent workflow and validating that the behavior and functionality is the same. Once you've validated this behavior, this new workflow can be added to a GitHub repository and the migration is complete. Doing all three phases manually is not only very tedious, but it is incredibly error-prone. That is why GitHub Actions Importer was created. GitHub Actions Importer is a tool to both plan and automate your migration to GitHub Actions. There are 5 CI/CD systems supported by the product, and the goal of any migration, any converted workflow from GitHub Actions Importer, has a goal of converting at least 80% of any given workflow. The remaining percent must be converted manually, and as such, any output of the product should be reviewed with human eyes prior to taking it as your production workload. So let's see it in action. In this demo, I'm going to be showing how GitHub Actions Importer can be used to migrate your Travis CI pipelines to GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions Importer is distributed as a Docker image and an extension to the GitHub CLI to interact with that Docker image. The first command that you will run when you are setting up your environment to begin migrations is the configure command. What this will do is start an interactive command prompt to collect all the credentials needed in order to authenticate with your Travis CI pipelines, as well as your desired GitHub repositories. These credentials are persisted into a .env.local file, so you can run this configure command once and have the values persist across all of your migration events. The next command that you will run fairly often is the update command. What the update command will do is update the Docker image that is used in order to ensure that you have the latest features and functionality present. We ship new versions of this Docker image on a daily basis, so it is a best practice to run this command often to make sure you are fully up to date. The next command that we will look at is the audit command. What the audit command will do is fetch all the pipelines defined in a Travis CI organization, convert each of these pipelines to their equivalent GitHub Actions workflow, and then write a report that summarizes how complete of a migration is possible. So here we can see that there are a handful of files written to the local file system. The last here is the audit summary. Let's take a look at the contents of this file. This file is a pretty simple markdown file. However, the data contained within it is incredibly useful to help plan your migration to GitHub Actions. So here we can see in this Travis CI instance, there were 3 total pipelines. None were fully successful. Now, this would be if a pipeline had all of the constructs of the pipeline converted, the jobs, stages, the steps, as well as all the individual items, such as the individual build steps, the individual triggers, converted to their equivalent in GitHub Actions. However, 3 were partially successful, meaning the main constructs of the pipeline were converted. However, there was an individual build step or an individual build trigger that was not automatically converted. There were 0 unsupported pipeline types and 0 failures. Next, there's a breakdown of the job types used across these pipelines. In the case of Travis CI, these job types correlate to the built-in language defaults. So there's one pipeline using the default behavior for PHP pipelines and one for Ruby pipelines. Next, there's a breakdown of all the build steps used across these pipelines. The first category here is the known build steps, and this is a descending order list of the most commonly used build steps today. The next category here is a list of the unsupported build steps, meaning a step would be unsupported if they provide functionality that is fundamentally not compatible with GitHub Actions. And then finally here we see a list of all the actions that were used in order to convert these build steps. This descending order list of the most commonly used actions is a fantastic resource to help you plan any security reviews or compliance requirements and helps inform you with what first and third party dependencies you'll be taking once you migrate to GitHub Actions. There's also a similar breakdown here for the build triggers, environment variables, and a random other catch-all category. The rest of the audit summary contains a manifest of all the files that are written to disk during the audit. Generally, there'll be 3 files written for each pipeline, one for the original pipeline contents itself, one for the network response from the Travis CI APIs, and then one for the converted GitHub Actions workflow itself. The next command that we will look at is the forecast command. What a forecast will do is fetch all the jobs that were completed after a specified start date. By default, we use the last 7 days worth of jobs, and use that data to calculate metrics that show what your total consumption of your build agent looks like today. So let's run this command. As before, the output here is a forecast report. It's another markdown file for us to use to plan our migration to GitHub Actions. And let's look at the contents here. So here we can see over the past 7 days, there were a total of 9 jobs run across 9 unique pipelines. Then there are metrics surrounding the total execution time, the total queue time, the time between when a job was requested and when an agent was available to execute it, and then metrics around job concurrency. These metrics are really helpful in helping plan and influence your decisions in setting up the number and type of GitHub Actions runners to configure in order to meet the same level of demand. The next command that we will look at is the dry run command. Now, what a dry run will do is fetch an individual pipeline, convert it to its equivalent GitHub Actions workflow, and then write that workflow to your local file system. First, let's take a look at the file that we are converting. So here we see the travisci.yaml file where we are using the defaults for the Ruby language. We are running a matrix build and then running some bundler and echo statements. So let's look at what was converted from this. So here we see on the right side this converted workflow. We are defining some build triggers. We are defining one job running on the latest Ubuntu latest image. We are checking out source code, setting up Ruby, using a matrix of Ruby versions, same as we were in Travis CI, and then running these same bash scripts that we were running in Travis CI. So while this is using different syntax, the end result is a pipeline that functions equivalently. The last command that we will look at is the migrate command. Excuse me. What the migrate command will do is, again, fetch an individual pipeline from Travis CI, convert it to its equivalent GitHub Actions workflow, and then open up a pull request on your behalf with the converted workflow contents. Let's run this command. So here we see in the console output a link to a pull request. Let's look at this. Here, as we might expect, the files that are included in this pull request are the exact same file contents used during the dry run. Now, this pull request is the most natural and a perfect place to do any final code reviews or last checkups prior to merging the pull request and marking completion of this workflow's migration to GitHub Actions. So that's end-to-end how you can use GitHub Actions Importer to plan, forecast, and automate your Travis CI pipeline's migration to GitHub Actions.